Welcome to GenderMeowster Podcast Network. Genderful is a talk show featuring non-binary and trans folks discussing various topics and special interests. We kindly remind our listeners that no person is a monolith of identities. All opinions are the speaker's own. This show airs live on Twitch at twitch.tv/GenderMeowster, and VODs with show notes can also be found on YouTube. So, hello everyone, my name is GenderMeowster. I use they, them pronouns. This is my channel/podcast, and I'm really grateful to have a very cool guest as my guest today. Hello, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Jay Dragon. I am a queer game designer and publisher, and I write tabletop role-playing games all about community, liminality, identity, and the magic of the mundane. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. We have a question in the chat that I would love to ask you right off the bat, since we're doing intros.
Sure, totally.
Ninja Wolf is here to stay. Asks, may I ask why no pronouns? Sorry if that's a weird question.
Not a weird question at all. I don't use pronouns if possible. That means like I'll if you must, they them will do. It's just I prefer basically like the constructing sentences without using my pronouns, and that has come, kind of, and also to answer a question that's on that sheet there, what's my history with gender, that's come after about being out as trans in one form or another, and like thinking about my gender since like 2012, and it's really just like I don't like the way people use pronouns if I don't trust them. I feel like pronouns, much like names, give people a certain degree of power over me, and I like to control that. And also, it's fun to watch journalists and folks writing about me have to struggle a little bit. It's like the respectful struggle, Like, if my pronouns are too easy, I get, they start taking it for granted. I'm like, no, listen. I'm trans. This isn't gonna be super easy for you. And I want it to be a little tricky. Yeah.
I love that.
If it ever gets too easy, maybe I'll figure out something else. But I like it for now. It's a good, I can tell when someone has respect on my name,
Yeah, totally. So the not having pronouns is also a journey for anyone writing about you.
Oh, for sure. Well, it's like there's some good style guides online on how to talk about people without using pronouns. It's if you look back, like you'll see my close friends use pronouns for me, and that's totally fine. But my thing is always like, I don't want, most pronouns I'm not okay with. And increasingly it's like when I stick with one pronoun for too long, I get kind of sick of it, like I got sick of he, him, I got sick of she, her, I got sick of they, them. I got, I tried out and then got sick of a bunch of different neopronouns. And so it's like, no, there's none of that. If you know me well enough to know what pronouns you should be using, you'd know. Otherwise, just keep some respect on my name.
I love that so much. I also feel like, as at least for me as a trans person, like I picked my name. It wasn't my name assigned at birth. I put a lot of thought into it. And so someone using your name, using my name, at least for me, is like the most respectful thing someone could do sometimes. Because it's like, I spent so much time coming up with that.
I think for me, I kind of view names. I have a complicated relationship with names. I have many based on the circumstances and the sociality. Jay is my public name. It's the name I wear out in public, like a nice coat. But I have other names too. They're just, not for most folks to use. And I like that because it keeps a little barrier between myself and others. And it also kind of, I feel like critically, if people are going to know one thing about my gender, right, it's that they don't quite get it. I want people to be a little on their toes, and having multiple names, not using pronouns, like having a long and tangled gender story kind of all serves for that same, you don't know me as well as you think you do.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so fun. So speaking of neopronouns, I'm 100% jumping like 4 topics ahead. The first thing I noticed about this incredible book that you wrote that I now own is like
Wanderhome, my
the
beloved.
first, yes, Wanderhome, the wonderful. The first like example with people in it has all the people have neopronouns in it.
Yes.
It's so
Yeah.
cool.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
Yeah.
reading that and I just wanted to cry. It was so beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the examples of play. So for those who don't know, Wanderhome is a pastoral fantasy tabletop game about traveling animal folk as they journey through a magical, beautiful world. It's a tabletop role-playing game, so part of what it has are these examples of play, which are these like paragraphs showing what it's like to play the game. And one thing that's true throughout sort of all of Wanderhome's design was that we put a lot of work into making it look like there wasn't much work put in at all. To the point where I've had people ask me, like, oh, like, have you considered releasing more excerpts of playing games with your friends, like the examples of play? And no, those are completely fabricated. We made up those examples. We chose every single name purposefully. We chose the pronouns purposefully. They're fabricated because it was important to us, first off, that from the exact moment you pick up the book, from the first few pages, there are people like you, and also that play is bigger than how most people think of it, right? When most people talk about a lot of tabletop games, or even like when designers think about tabletop games, oftentimes they're not thinking about like the folk who don't really want to play, who can't really like talk that much and just kind of want to sit and do a drawing, or people who don't have the energy to consistently engage at a complex level that some games require. And so I wanted Wanderhome literally from the first few pages to be like, hey, this is a game that what it means to play this game is different than maybe what your preconceived notion of what playing a game means if you're only familiar with Dungeons and Dragons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And part of that's pronouns.
there's a lot of wonderful differences, I would say.
I hope so. We try our best.
So let's see. Before we dive into all of the more questions I have about Wanderhome more in depth, you've described a little bit of what Wanderhome is. Can you tell us what a pastoral fantasy is?
Yeah. So pastoral fantasy refers to a particular genre of fantasy that has somewhat fallen out of style in 21st century American literature. Think a lot about, certainly Wind in the Willows is an example. Parts of Redwall go there. I think also a very classic example is like when you think of the Shire and the Hobbit, or even just kind of like Tolkien's investment in describing like scenery first and these beautiful places that you're traveling through. It's a focus on the daily lives of the people who live there. It's a focus on small folk, like shepherds and poets and mailmen and kind of all the jobs that normally get overlooked. And it's a focus much more on small communities and their relationship to their land than it is on war and epic conquest and kind of vast sense of scale. Moomins is another good example of pastoral fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so it's like, honestly, it's like drinking water. It feels like drinking water compared to like other TTRPG stuff that I've done. It's so refreshing.
Yeah, I'm so glad. That's the goal, really, is to make something that, I don't know. I wrote it at a point where it was like, I really want something that is easy for me. I want something that feels refreshing, that feels relaxed, that feels encompassing, and it managed to deliver on that for me, and I'm grateful that it's done that for other people too.
Mm-hmm. So when I was creating a character with my friend last night, because you have the PDF and the book, and you can even buy a bundle where you get the PDF and the books in the mail, which is like so great. My friend was using the PDF last night, and one of the first things that they noticed was that there's alt text in the pictures. I've
Yeah.
never seen that done in any
Mhm.
tabletop PDF I've ever bought, and I just think that is so
Mhm.
cool.
Well, so the secret of alt text, and one of the things I think is really interesting about it, a lot of people comment on the alt text. I think the reason for it is because it is a sign of accessibility that that people who don't need screen readers notice easily. The truth of the matter is that the reason you don't see that many PDFs with alt text is because it's pretty hard to set up a PDF to be screen reader compatible.
Hmm.
And if you have alt text, but your PDF isn't set up that way, the alt text is completely useless.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there was a lot of work on the back end done. We have a consultant who worked with us in order to make the PDF accessible. We spent a lot of time making sure that, kind of when you read it on a screen reader, it all flows properly. And it took a lot of, my business partner, Grubby, who also did all the graphic design, she spent, months kind of figuring out that component along with everything else she was doing and designing with that in mind. And yeah, alt text in the PDF was part of that, was having, the images when you mouse over them, you'll see text descriptions. And I, I had to write all of those. They were a combination of artist briefs and just me trying my best to describe what was there. And yeah, that was like I spent about, I think, a whole day just writing all that out into a Google Doc and then sending that over to Grubby.
What a great use of a day. I think that not only is alt text great for screen readers, for me as someone with ADHD and autism, it helps me
Mm-hmm.
draw my attention to the important parts of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, what is notable about this? And hearing
Mm-hmm.
from one of the creators or one of the collaborators on an image, like this is the important part of the image, or like it'll
Mm-hmm.
point
Mm-hmm.
out things that I didn't even notice that's
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
important to the image but I didn't pick up on. And so I feel
Mm-hmm.
like it's also like a neurodivergent
Mm-hmm.
accessibility piece too.
Yeah. I mean, one of the critical things about accessibility is that, there's kind of this concept that shows up a lot when discussing accessible design, which is that you have your primary audience who you are helping, and then you have secondary audiences who are also helped. And when discussing like how do you design something accessible, you're thinking not only, like how can this be helpful for someone who needs it on this level, but who also needs it in a different way that you can't anticipate. And so it was a really cool thing we got to do. I'm really grateful that the Kickstarter we were able to make it all work out with the Kickstarter, and it adds, I think, a lot to the PDF. Even just to know that a couple lizards in the background of an image are gay, that's all you need.
I love how
Or
gay
point,
the book is so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, that was really intentional. I was worried actually that it was too subtle. Because Sleepaway, my last project, was not subtle at all. Um, but then I got a letter from a mom who wanted a refund because the book wasn't family friendly. And I realized that I'd done a good enough job and I'd made it gay enough to upset her. And if I could upset her, then I was happy.
That's so amazing. Oh my
Mhm.
gosh.
To clarify for folks, the book is completely family friendly. She was upset over the presence of neopronouns and the use of the word queer at one component and things like that. So
Hmm. Well, I'm also excited to talk about Sleepaway in a handful of minutes.
mm-hmm,
I know less
mm-hmm.
about that game, so we'll do that as our
Yeah,
our section two.
yeah,
Um,
for sure.
so Trans Capybara has a follow up question to you describing the alt text. How do you test the PDF with a screen reader? Do you have a suggested screen reading software?
I do not have a suggested software. I don't use screen readers, so I don't know what's best. Our consultant is blind and uses, oh, excuse me. Uh, I don't actually know whether or not she's blind, but she needed to use a screen reader. Um, and through that, we were able to basically send it over to her. She took a look at it, or she read through it and was like, "Hey, this isn't like, hey, this part isn't reading properly, or this part isn't reading properly, or like this is working. And we were able to take all that, apply all that. We also had, and also again, this is all my business partner's work. I am just simply the person who supported her while she, had a bajillion tabs on accessibility and layout open and was researching it. But we kind of followed the accessibility guidelines. We followed color contrast guidelines. We followed like screen reader. The nice thing about all of this, right, is that you're not the first people to ever need to figure out how to make a document screen reader accessible, right? There are guidelines that have been written up 30 years ago on how to make PDFs accessible to screen readers. And so we're just following all of that. And we're just applying kind of the stuff that's been figured out then, and utilizing it in our document and running, checking with our consultant to make sure stuff is, coming up.
I love that. So someone in the chat is also mentioning another form of accessibility, an insectophobia-friendly version of the game. Was that part of the core book? Is that third-party content? Yep. Can you tell us more about that?
Nope, that's part of the core book. If you download the PDF, you will get access to 3 PDFs, or sorry, 4 in total, but 3 of which are the same text. You get, the PDF of the book itself. You get the insectophobe-friendly version where every single instance of a bug has a little, little blank, screen over it to cover it up. It's not perfect. I'm a little unhappy with that version, but I think it does the job well. I want to revisit it when we update the PDF for typos again. The work is never done. And then there's also a black and white printer-friendly version that if you need to like print out a large chunk of the book for like a research paper, who knows why you need to print out your copy of Wanderhome on a home printer. But if you do need to, there's a black and white friendly version that's been formatted to fit letter paper, and all the art has been removed.
So we have a follow-up question on that from Gemathist. Is there a Wanderhome plain text edition or PDF? Are there plans to be one? I'm thinking of friends with dyslexia who might struggle with a beautiful font.
So the one that I just mentioned, the black and white version, is, I think, probably where you want to land. We don't have a plain text version at this time. That's because it is, if you've ever tried to export something from a PDF to a text file, you will understand why it is slightly more labor intensive than it might seem. And then also, it is kind of on our list of things we'd like to get done. But right now, kind of our big thing has been, it's a, there are many, there are many different moving parts. The answer is, we have this black and white one for now. If it helps at all, the vast majority of the text is not in the cover font as you're familiar with. That is just a title font.
Yes, may I show a page to display the font?
Yes, please go for it.
Okay. I've randomly opened to Metropolis.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So the font,
and then if you go to the back of the book, Grubby has written a whole little thing about the fonts we use. If I remember right, it is Luminari for the headers, which is a NCL-esque font inspired by 15th century Italian manuscripts, and then the body font is Arno Pro, which is a very classical 16th century, also Italian font, if I remember correctly. 15th, 16th century Florence. Grubby could talk much more about the fonts than I can. I certainly, watched her figure it all out, but my business partner, she's the expert. She's at Ruby Lavin on Twitter, and she's working on an article right now about the fonts and art direction of Wanderhome. And so when that comes out, that'll have much more information. Thank you.
Yeah. It's such a gorgeous book. Like the art is so good. How many artists worked on it?
15. And then Ruby was the art director. So she coordinated and brought everything together from there. But we had 15 different artists from Malaysia to Sweden. Shout out to Ruby. She is my queen.
I love that. I love that so much.
I will also say, Trans Capybara, in response to your question about whether or not the source text should be in LaTeX, I did not need you. That is the most computer programmer thought I've ever seen. I'm not gonna. I it's not my. That's the most computer programmer thought I've ever seen.
That's my wife. That's
Please,
my wife.
in 5 words, tell me you're a software
She
engineer
is.
without telling me. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, no, that is, no, I actually used to write in LaTeX. For those unfamiliar, LaTeX is a programming language designed to export very, very nice looking documents that I used to write in that when I was in high school, and I stopped because it managed to have the perfect mix of impossible for other people to edit, and it was all the fun of debugging software with all the inaccessibility of sending someone an InDesign file.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it was perfectly suited for none of my needs, but it does lead to very beautiful looking PDFs.
That is a really funny way to put that. Perfectly suited for none of your needs. It's really great. It's about as far up as I can reach too. For those hearing the podcast episode who are on audio, I just had top surgery and this is my first stream back from that, so I have T-Rex arms today. It's very funny. I'm having so much fun with this conversation. Okay, so my next question for you is, what game system is Wanderhome based on, and how did you decide?
So Wanderhome is built on the Belonging Outside Belonging system, or No Dice, No Masters, built by Avery Alder and Benjamin Rosenbaum for Dream Askew and Dream Apart, which I first got my hands on in 2014 and came out in 2017 or 2018. Dream Askew and Dream Apart are 2 games about a community at the margins. Dream Askew is a post-apocalyptic queer commune, and Dream Apart is a Jewish shtetl. And both of them are really wonderful, beautiful games, and also critically kind of outline the structure that Wanderhome, the kind of the very base structure that Wanderhome riffs on. And I think I write in Belonging Outside Belonging. That is kind of my first system. When I write games that aren't BOB, I have to ask myself, like, well, would this be better off as BOB first? Like, that's kind of always the question I ask. I really enjoy it because first off, it is very easy for me to write in. It is writing for BOB is almost like it's almost like game mechanics are poetry and verse. And so kind of leaning into that rhythm is much more comfortable for me than having to deal with the kind of mechanically precise language that a lot of game design calls for. I think also, it's a very beautiful, it's a very simplistic system, and Wanderhome kind of tweaks it in order to fit kind of the themes of Wanderhome, but the core idea, right, of no dice, no GM, as no baseline assumption there is a GM, and kind of the rhythm of the tokens as you take them and you pass them, that kind of staccato beat kind of forming the punctuation for the play was really kind of critical for me. Yes, it also, as John East says, makes it so smooth to create custom content for it as well. That's also super accurate, is that its focus on language as mechanics, the way in which like the words you use are like more important than like exactly what the mechanics do, or like the mechanics being very rules light and the language you use being the critical part, means that's very comfortable for new people to kind of get into it, or folks who are more familiar from traditional writing, literary work, poetry. It means that BOB kind of is very grounding in that sense.
Just have to take my medicine right quick.
No worries.
So
very smart to have a robot that reminds you.
Yes, 100%. So one of the things that I noticed about the game, the phrase "no dice, no masters" totally like is a dead ringer for it. Like, you don't use dice to play this game, and you can play it GMless. You can play it GMless. You can play it with rotating GMs, or you can have a GM. Those are like 3 different options. I'll have you know I read most of your book while camping over 2 different camping trips.
Aw, that's a
So,
pretty ideal spot to read it. So,
totally. There was no
mm-hmm.
hammocks that I was in, but there were
Mm-hmm.
campfires and marshmallows.
There's nowhere else I could ask to read it, so that's good. Yeah, no, Wanderhome uses a what I call it GM agnostic. It's pretty new. There's not really a ton of people doing stuff with it. I got the idea from Jamila Najati's Balak Bayan Returning Home, which is a beautiful BOB game about elemental sort of elementals from Filipino tradition, Filipino like magic and tradition existing in this cyberpunk Shadowrun-esque corporate future. And it uses that same GM agnostic approach. And Jami got it kind of from the same, kind of developed it for the same reason I ended up using it, which is GMless play can be tricky if there's an asymmetrical level of experience at the table, right? If one person is much more comfortable than the other players are. And that's kind of the origin. That's not the origin of GM'd play, but I think that's part of what led to its popularity for a while, is that GM'd play is very forgiving if there's one person who knows what they're doing and a bunch of people who feel like they don't know what they're doing.
Totally.
And the secret, of course, is that there's no such thing as knowing what you're doing. There is simply, kind of the act of play in its miraculous occurrence. But I think that people really enjoy kind of feeling like there is like a guide, someone who's there to, stabilize them and be like, hey, don't worry, like walk along, like you've got this. And the reason it's GM agnostic, partially is because I wanted to kind of give space for folks who do want GM to play, but also because I wanted to kind of emphasize that there is no correct way to play the game. And that kind of extends even to that level, right? Where if you've got a GM, if you don't, if you have multiple GMs, if you're all GMing, however you want to frame it, it's still kind of within the game. There's no, need to, like, it's all kind of encompassed there.
My friend that was going through the character creation last night looked at a list of 4 options and was like, am I allowed to pick a 5th option? And I was like, yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's very written like the suggestions that you include are like specific but open-ended somehow at the same time, and it totally gives permission to the players and the creators and the people interacting with this to just do whatever. But it's enough information that if people are not feeling creative, there's options. It's so
absolutely.
cool.
And as I put it earlier, it took a lot of work it takes a lot of work to make things seem easy. It is very easy to make something seem hard. It is incredibly easy to make something appear hard. It is much harder to make something appear easy. And there was it took about 2 months to write Wanderhome, and it took about 6 months to edit Wanderhome, or even 8 months to edit Wanderhome. So it was easy to make. It was I wrote the game somewhat quickly. I edited the game. It took a long time, and it took a lot of editors, and it took a lot of going through.
Did you know that there is a Wanderhome Discord server?
I do. I am aware. Trouser Mouse, who runs it, is a delight of a person. And I am not in it because it feels a little invasive for me to be joining fan spaces. I want people to have their own environments, but I'm a big fan of the Wanderhome Discord. I hope they have fun there.
There are 729 people in it right now, which is
Ooh, that's bigger than the last time someone told me that number. Wow, yeah, that's a pretty good number.
It's yeah, it seems it's pretty popular, and I love the like. Trouser Mouse is just one of many people doing third-party content for Wanderhome. Like, there's a whole community of people that are really geeking out hard about like making new natures and new playbooks and stuff.
It's
so cool.
That was really critical to me. When we did the Kickstarter, one of the stretch goals was the Haith Grant, which was we set aside about $11,000 to distribute among 40 to 50 creators, and be like, here's, 300, here's 300, excuse me, there's 300, 400, $500. Make your thing, go out into the world, make what you're going to make. If you finish it, publish it, please, it's all yours. If you don't finish it, that's okay, that's fine. No stress. This isn't an assignment, this is a grant. And a lot of the initial stuff that came out of Wanderhome third-party stuff was from those folks, and a lot of other folks have gotten involved too, which I really adore. It was really important to us that we really prioritized, like, hey, we're not trying to make like a cool book and then that's it. We're trying to make a space for lots of folks to come together for a lot of different reasons. And also credit to Nem over at Sandy Pug Games and the Sandy Pug Games team for the original idea of a Kickstarter like grant community fund sort of work. I don't think, Monster Care Squad paved the way for Wanderhome to be able to do what we did with the Haith Grant. So thank you there.
And for context, for folks who are just learning about Wanderhome today, Haith is the name of your setting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The good old Haith. Yeah, and we named it the Haith Grant. I hope to expand it to other stuff. I would love to. We're gonna kind of continue to do stuff like that for our future Kickstarters as well, especially if our Kickstarters really succeed. And I hope to. I have big dreams in my heart of someday just having a small grant fund to be able to support creators and be like, hey, you've never done a Kickstarter before, you can't afford cover art, here, get some cover art, make that Kickstarter a reality. It's that kind of work is something that I really want to put into the world long term in the future.
What a wonderful legacy.
I hope so. I hope it comes together. That's the danger of dreams. You can't get too attached to them, but I get attached to them.
I hear that. Do you have a playbook that you enjoy a lot? Favorite might be too strong a word because they're probably all your favorite, but is there one that you enjoy a lot this week, or maybe a handful?
My favorite to play is the Ragamuffin. If you give me free choice, I will always pick to be the Ragamuffin. Or perhaps the Veteran is the other character who I will free choice pick. I think the Veteran is also my favorite artistically, like in terms of what they're doing like to the book as an art object. I really love the Veteran, especially the Veteran's 7th play is really something special. And then I think game design wise, the Moth Tender I think is my favorite, just because I think it adds so much every single time the Moth Tender is in a game. Like, I think that was kind of the moment with the playbooks where I was like, oh, hey, this is a playbook that I think figures it all out. Yeah, that's the Veteran. That's my grumpy uncle of a child.
I love it so much. Moth
You
Tender
wield
is
the
so
blade
fun.
that must never be drawn again. Yeah.
Yeah, that came up in a one-shot I attempted. So I want to tell you a story. So I was camping and reading the book, and I was with my friends, and we had a week. But we put off playing the game until like the day before the last day. Because we're having so much fun doing everything else. And we ended up having so much fun with like character creation and learning the rules that we didn't actually get to playing. We spent 2 hours reading the book and making characters, and then everyone's like, time to go swim in a creek, and it's like, okay. And then we didn't play, and I was like, oh no. So do you have any tips for folks that want to run a one shot? Like, what do you focus on? Is there anything maybe you skip? Like, in my case, like, no one had ever played a tabletop game before, ever, except for me and maybe my wife a little tiny bit, and so it was like a bunch of newbies.
Yeah. I mean, I know how I run it for. So I've run Wanderhome for a lot of folks. If your goal is to get to playing as quick as possible, I think the best tip is get people to choose their characters and be thinking about their characters as soon as possible, and then ask them a lot of leading questions and just kind of really kind of take a firm facilitator role, because I think that the long character creation sessions happen when there's not really anyone, like when it's very meandering. However, I will say it sounds like you all had a lot of fun,
We
and
totally did.
I don't, you know, if that is what is fun for you, I know people who just enjoy making characters from Wanderhome, and that's fine too. I think that in my experience, the trick to getting to to play in a timely manner is to step up and kind of be a facilitator that helps keep things rolling. But if you don't want to, that's okay too. You can just, make characters and find satisfaction that way. But yeah, when I ran it with my mom and her friends, which, for context, my mom is not someone who plays tabletop games. None of her friends are. The way I did it was like, let's get them choosing characters as soon as I can. And I try to, when running it for folks, especially folks who aren't, what do you call, like who aren't, how do I put it? Like, when I think about folks my age, it's a little easier to run stuff for them, right? Or, folks our age, where it's like, I am familiar with the media and emotional references outside games that these people might be familiar with that I can kind of use to help buffet them along as I teach them how to play. When I'm running games for folks who are very old or very young, I think a lot about what are their reference points in terms of the stories they've told before and the stories they've consumed, and how can I make it easy for them. And so for older folks, the way I oftentimes try to do it is I try to frame it as like, I explained to them very quickly, like I just, and my mom's friends are certainly, the boomer version of nerds. So, this is easier with them, but it's like commuted dell'arte, the idea of like, the moth tender is always the moth tender, but let's figure out what makes your moth tender unique. And I think that helps older folks in a little bit more. And then with very young folks, I kind of try to take a very opposite approach where it's like, tell me about your character. Oh, it sounds like your character might be a vagabond. Let's do that. Like I kind of flip the switch totally with younger
Yeah,
folks. And, yeah, so it's how do you run it for a group? You got to know, you got to feel what's right, what's right for your style and also for that group.
I love that. Well, we created a very fun nature that I would love to see art for sometime, and maybe we'll
Well,
play over Zoom or something sometime.
hell yeah. Heck yeah, absolutely.
Are there fillable character sheets for Wanderhome?
Yes. People never know where to find them. They're always on the itch.io page. They're form fillable PDFs. Some wonderful folks have also made some Google Sheets if that's more your style. But you can get those off of the Wanderhome itch.io page, and we're gonna get them up on our website soon. It's just been a long year.
Yeah, you've had
uh,
plenty of things to do.
yeah, for sure. And the thing about running a small business that they don't tell you is that there's no such thing as getting all your work done. It is
No, there's
just
not.
like
Yeah.
it's a lot like in those video games that where it's like overcooked, where it's like you're preparing meals, and the goal is not to win, it's to keep up as the meals pile on higher and higher and see how long you can make it before the incoming orders crush your little chef. And that's what running a small business is like, is that you're not trying to get all your work done. You're trying to stay ahead on the stuff that needs to get done today and on the stuff that needs to get done this week, and to be aware of the stuff that needs to get done next month.
Yeah, when I started Twitch streaming, I didn't sleep enough hours. I was sleeping like 4 to 6 hours a night, so spending like 18 hours a day
Mm-hmm.
on my overlay, learning about bots, like all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of
Mm-hmm.
stuff, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's such a good description of owning your own like small business or being an independent contractor. It's like the work never
Mm-hmm.
ends. I think what I've learned is, one, getting help is really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Like if
Mm-hmm.
there are people who are willing to help you uh for free or for pay or
Mm-hmm.
getting
Mm-hmm.
paid in like baked goods or tabletop games or whatever, like
Mm-hmm.
take the
Mm-hmm.
help where you can get it, ask for help
Oh, for sure.
as much as possible. And two, like
Mm-hmm.
have work-life balance and like have days that you don't schedule things on, that you can just be a person
Oh,
and,
absolutely. Yeah.
you know, sleep enough.
Yes.
Everything else is harder
Yeah.
if you're not sleeping enough.
Yes, that is also agonizingly true.
Yeah, totally. Mirror Me asks, how long has Wanderhome been out now?
The PDF has been out since April, and the book came out at the start of August, I think. It's been a couple months, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I already kind of know in my head what are the next big projects. But it's hard because for me, Wanderhome has been done since December. But for everyone else, Wanderhome got done a couple months ago. So I'm already not, chomping at the bit to get to the next big thing. And everyone else is like, oh, what? But I just got this one. I had one unpleasant person who does not like me for other reasons. A comment on a article announcing our upcoming releases with what do you call it? Slow down so everyone else gets a chance to breathe. And I was just like, no, I won't. Out of spite for this particular guy, I will not slow down.
Well,
Hi, Logan.
we're all
Hi,
a big
Logan.
fan.
Welcome.
Yes. So, I have played GMless Wanderhome with people who know what they're doing with, and by that I mean they have enough confidence in themselves because they played some tabletop games. That's really what it is. And
yeah, that's all you need. That's it's confidence. Yeah.
The tricky bit is we keep having to schedule like 2 or 3 months out to play a game, to play a one shot, because when you're good at tabletop, people want your attention. So
that's why my approach for scheduling games will always be I announce that I want to play a game in the morning, and then I see who can make it in the evening. And if someone's busy every night, then I'm so sorry, but that's been my tactic, and it's a little it's a little I can find 3 people who can play now. Do I always find my 3 favorite people to play with? Not necessarily. If I really want to play a game, can I find 3 people in an hour? Yeah, I can put out the feelers.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, I know folks who are always busy, who are always free, where I'm just like, hey, are you free right now? Get over here this instant. I have a game we need to play immediately.
I love that. Oh, so much fun. Well, I've also been like really grateful. Incan Stories here in the chat has actually sort of organized some of these games, like called everyone together and been like, let's do the thing. And I can tell you there's been multiple times that Ink and I have sat down and made characters together because my reading comprehension that day was just crap. I was just like, I'm not parsing the information. I need someone to hold my hand. And Logan has been kind enough to hold my hand. Logan's also been a guest on the show and is a total delight.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
Just made an autobiographical tabletop game called
I
Logan.
know, I'm so excited to read it. I have not yet had the chance to, but I'm very excited to check it out.
It's so cool.
It is high on my list of things I have to read.
So excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so my last explicitly Wanderhome question, and then we have a bunch of other questions. Is who generally seems interested in Wanderhome? Is there a target demographic?
We have found there are folks who are. We have found demographics. We have a joke of like, it's for all queer people, dads, and like teenage girls. And that is not like fully accurate, but that is like in my experience, like of folks who get really hyped about Wanderhome. It's like men who have had a child and that's forced them to kind of unlearn some of their toxic masculinity. All queer people, except for the ones who are a little too insecure to go with stuff that like who are like, no, it must be edgy, it must be dark. And I'm like, just confront the ache of of slowly learning to heal from your trauma with me. It's okay. And then it's and then yeah, like those are kind of the main groups. But we don't have a targeted demographic. I write for myself and my friends. If I like it and my friends like it, then I'm probably onto something, and I'm sure there'll be other people who like it too. I write for my campers and my summer camp. Um, and I don't really think a lot about, like, oh well, I have to be selling to this demographic, because in my experience, when you have a really strong idea of who your core demographics are, you lose out on everyone else. And I
Hmm.
would much rather just make things and put them out into the world, and trust that if I just, my priority is get it in front of many people and see who's excited, and kind of, not stress about, like, oh well, do like, who's the audience for this. I'm just like, it exists, it'll find its audience, I know it will, I believe in it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. Well, my next question pivots to some of the more biography type questions that we discussed. What about your experience with trauma healing and its intersections with gender? Do you want
Mhm.
to share a bit about that? You mentioned it a second ago.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. So a lot of the work I do, kind of outside of games, in my personal life, with my local community, and sort of the research I do has to do a lot with, like, I'm no expert by any means, although I hope to someday know enough to call myself one. But I study a lot of transformative justice. I study a lot of, like, I guess, I don't know, like a lot of like critical philosophy, a lot of like looking at, trauma and trauma analysis and ACA or 12-step research or 12-step philosophy, trying to make something that feels coherent to me. My roommate is even heavier into that stuff than I am. They are like very, very deep in that whole kind of sphere. And so I learn from them a lot. And I don't know. Wanderhome is very much about that. Like, I feel like a lot of Wanderhome is about, what does it mean to learn to heal? Which is a very, I think, difficult question to think about in a world that is structurally unable to heal. And so a lot of the work I do is really invested in, like, what could it look like to do that? Um, and yeah, that's kind of my my work on that front. Is I'm not much of I don't care much for therapy on a institutional level. I'm much more interested in, um I think the way my roommate put it that I thought was very smart was, there's a difference between healing and getting better, and we're taught that those are the same, which makes it really hard to understand, like, what does it mean to heal, because we can't distinguish healing from getting better. And so a lot
Hmm.
of the work I do is kind of, what does it mean to heal without necessarily stressing about getting better.
I really appreciate that distinction.
Hmm.
That's that's lovely to consider.
Yeah. Well, because, like, if you think about it in terms of like what is overwhelmingly kind of the goal of a lot of, for example, exposure therapy, like in the context of OCD work.
Hmm.
Oftentimes the context of exposure therapy with OCD, especially when done by folks who are trained but have an ulterior motive, is a lot to do with getting someone to behave neurotypically as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Exactly, Logan. And better has a different definition, especially under capitalism. Yeah, better frequently refers to performing better and acting neurotypically. And acting healthily. And like, what is, how can we get you back in the workforce? And
Hmm.
to me, the critical question becomes, what does it mean to heal without worrying about getting better, as opposed to what does it mean, as opposed to the overwhelming model being getting better without healing.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's that felt like a punch in the stomach, but in the best way.
Mhm.
I think a lot about that. So I I have I'll give you a second to like sip your ginger ale or something. I have chronic pain and identify as a person with an invisible disability because you can't see pain unless you're like my spouse and you've learned to read it on my face, but it's not something, it's not as obvious as like some other disabilities. And so I remember when we were getting engaged. This is topical because our wedding anniversary is this Sunday, actually. We were getting engaged. I kept saying to her, like, what if I'm working on healing, but I may never get better. Like, I may never just suddenly be more able-bodied than I am today. This might just be the status quo forever. And are you really okay marrying into that? Like, because I don't want a partner who's like thinks I'm a project and I'm gonna just get better and be more productive magically eventually, because then there's just gonna be a ton of resentment and there's all this like, oh no, I have to get better so that I'll be loved, and that's like thankfully she was not about any of those things. And was just like, I love you for you, and if you never changed at all, that would be fine, and I just love you how you are, and all of this is totally great.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that's, that's a really the reason why I think, so many queer folks are also kind of disabled or are aware of disability is because, in large part, because queerness and disability exist kind of within the same framework of this kind of social constructed inaccessibility and at the same time kind of the miraculous capacity for love and care and self-worth within those spaces. And the thing is, once you start really strongly looking at, what is your relationship to your body on one axis, you're going to start looking at your relationship to your body on other axes. And like, I think that there is this kind of I think there is kind of this pressure oftentimes that is this focus on getting better. And I think overwhelmingly when you apply that to people where like when I guess I don't know, I guess one thing I've been thinking a lot about is just how like getting better is so thoroughly a construction, in that like being disabled is a spot everyone will experience. Like, we will all be disabled at some point or another. Like, if it doesn't happen one way or the other, you will grow old. And that the model of getting better is in a large part about has much more to do with extracting value from you than it does from loving yourself or from people being able to love you. So yeah, we are all only temporarily able-bodied. Yeah.
Totally. This is why universal basic income is so important.
As a good yes, the start.
Okay, so I think I've read at least the first 17 pages of Wanderhome, and then I've perused some of the playbooks and some of the natures, and haven't read all of them. Do you think Haith has UBI?
Haith has a culture of hospitality, and I think that UBI is a structural substitute for a culture of hospitality. That when your like goal and desire as a community is to make sure everyone is loved, then people are cared for. And when you don't have that, we need some kind of structural way to simulate that, in which case UBI kind of steps in that role. Haith does not have money, so it doesn't have UBI.
Yeah. I love not tracking money.
Yes.
It's great.
Yeah. And that's my perspective. And I think it's also, Haith is very different, not to break out my high school Marxist analysis of fantasy settings. Haith is a fantasy setting that is in a very different relationship to capitalism than 21st century, the 21st century developed world is, and that also means a very different social relationship. But I think if you want your Haith to have UBI, you can. I think my Haith does not. The idea of having UBI is kind of the same level of like distant as like the same way you don't need like a people's army,
Yeah.
It's like this is something that I advocate for in 21st century America, perhaps. Perhaps I argue for a people's militia or what have you, but yeah, in Antifa militia, etc. But I wouldn't advocate for that in my pastoral fantasy rabbit world. And I feel similarly about UBI.
Yeah, I hear that. That makes total sense to me. About 7 minutes ago, Johnny said in chat, some parts of Haith feel like a post-apocalyptic setting, but like in a good way.
Yeah, it actually was post-apocalyptic when I wrote the very, very first draft of the first page. I wrote that first page, and then I went, it's March of 2021. Sorry, it's March of 2020. It's March of 2020. I cannot write a post-apocalyptic game in March of 2020.
Yeah, no kidding.
Like beyond whether or not people want it, I don't want it. I don't want to read it. I don't want to play it.
Life was brutal enough.
Exactly. Really what it was, so I just at that point sat down and was like, well, what here is the important part? What am I actually writing? When I write that it's post-apocalyptic, what am I actually saying? And so I identified what was actually important to me when I described something as post-apocalyptic, and used that as my framework instead. But it did come from a place of post-apocalypse. It did come from a desire to build something better on the ruins of the old. It was kind of born from that impulse.
That is such a fun piece of trivia.
Well, there's a lot of fun little pieces of trivia in the book. Trying to think of my favorite. The cat in the illustration for The Guardian is a real person's cat. That's a cute one. That one came up in the Wired magazine article.
That's so fun.
Yeah, there's a backer messaged us like, hey, could I have my cat in the book? She means a lot to me. Is there a tier I can back to have that? We're like, we can't do this for everyone, but we'll do this for you.
Love that.
And so the backer donated 200 to an animal sanctuary, and we put his cat in the back of the book.
Oh my god, I could cry over that. That's so cute and sweet. I love how much like heart went into the making of this game, and like it sounds like a lot of people really needed that like wholesome sweetness, and so there was just an outpouring of love and support.
Yeah, people were really excited for it, which was really beautiful and unexpected and thrilling. Certainly it was beyond what we anticipated by an order of magnitude at least. But it was really amazing. I think people really needed something like it. I think that also it appealed to a lot of folks who had never thought about games in that way before, and so it kind of stuck a key into a lot of people's minds, and that's that's the important part. And our future projects hope to continue that energy, bring it in new ways, etc.
Love that. Well, I'm interested in multiple things. I'm interested. I don't know if you are allowed to talk about future projects, but I'm interested in hearing about that if you're allowed to.
I can talk a bit about it. I can.
Okay.
There's a little bit I can reveal.
Okay. I'm also interested in queer summer camp and talking about Sleepaway and talking about queer disability and being a small press publisher. So there's like a lot of
good.
so many threads. So many threads. Which one should we do first?
It's you're the host. I'm just along for the ride. I'll put on my little cap and you take me where you want to take me.
All right. We'll save the future for the end then.
Okay, sounds good. It's a way to trick people into lingering so they hear more about Yuzeba's bed and breakfast.
Can you tell us about working at a queer summer camp? I imagine that maybe influence Sleepaway eventually. So we'll kind of go down that path for a little while.
From 2009 to 2020. I've stopped working there because of my health, but for more than a decade, I worked at a summer camp, a LARP summer camp, live action role play summer camp in upstate New York for queer teenagers, called among and other teenagers as well. But large queer population, called the Wayfinder Experience, and that's kind of where I got my start with doing a lot of like trauma healing work, and also with game design work. That's where I had my first ever experience role playing as a sort of consciously, as opposed to just the games that kids play. I remember getting held by like crying in Brendan Lee Mulligan's arms while being chased by a sludge monster, and
That's amazing.
yeah, very a
So wait,
very
you went to summer camp with Brendan Lee Mulligan?
he was my counselor when I was a kid.
That's so amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
he taught me how to LARP in effect. Um, and if you read Sleepaway, it was my first release. It is one of my personal favorite games, although it's definitely my first game. It has a little bit of that first game quality, but it's my favorite little. It's one of my favorite little children. And it's all about it's a horror game set at a queer summer camp, much like the one I went to. And if you know where to look and who to look for, you'll see Brennan, you'll see Molly Ostertag, you'll see my business partner Grubby, you'll see a lot of folks in there. So
That's so cool.
yeah, I working with kids is very humbling from a game designer perspective. Working with queer kids is very humbling from a queer person perspective. Working with them both teaches you how to write games on a level that like nothing else will. Like nothing is a better boot camp than having to run LARPs for teens.
Wow, totally.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to get my son to play your game, and he decided that if there's no fighting, he's not interested.
Wanderhome's not a good game for younger boys, which is okay. I've never really been good at writing for younger boys anyway. uh, um, there are other very good games for younger boys. One of the things that I really admire about children is if they don't want to play a game, they simply won't. I think that is a remarkable talent that I wish more adults knew how to do. Um,
Totally.
Kids are very bright that way. Kids are very bright in a number of ways, and among them that.
I'm so excited about it. I want everyone to play with me. So I was like, oh, kid.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Logan shares, my partner's son is 11 and he loves Wanderhome to bits.
Hey, that rules too. Look, I'm not saying that it's not for young boys. I'm just saying I don't know how to write for young boys. So if I there are always more people who enjoy what I create than I can anticipate. But I also completely understand when someone doesn't want to play. I get it. I understand. I too have games I don't want to play. I like to joke that the journeying tools in Wanderhome are just like good bits of life advice that are just things that kids just know how to say. And if you're not a kid, you need a reminder.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. What is your favorite location at camp? At a camp place, a summer camp.
Suddenly, all the locations run through my mind. There was this the camp where I learned how to be a staff in training. The camp where I bit my teeth on being a teenager. 15, 16, 17 years old. Was out deep in the middle of the woods, like an hour's drive away from the nearest, small city, like 2 hours away from the camp headquarters. This little valley with a circular lake in the middle, and all the camp buildings kind of dotted around the edges, but mostly woods. And it was a very bad place to run a summer camp because at night the woods would get dark and there was very little lighting, and there were long paths you had to wander. And if a kid knew what they were doing, they knew how to sneak through the woods faster than any counselor could and get from like one building to the other, like at stupid useless speeds. and kind of, dash along. But it was a great spot to run LARPs for exactly all the reasons I just said. And it was also a great spot to be a camper for all the reasons I just said. And I remember watching, I remember one night, I had to sneak from back when they would put me in the boys' bunks. They didn't know what to do with me, and then I had to sneak over to the gender neutral bunk because there was a gender neutral bunk. It was a long
That's cool.
story.
That's cool that there was one.
It was before anyone knew what to do with anyone, so it was like it was a very interesting little thing. But they didn't know what to do with me, so they put me in the boys' bunk. And it was 3 a.m, and I snuck from one to the other to visit my friend. And when I got there, my friend had fallen asleep. So I ended up just sitting by the water, by the circular basin of a lake. And the way sound was that it echoed very perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
There was like a giant echo.
Mm-hmm.
And so sitting by the water and listening and watching the fireflies and the stars and the echo. And yeah, that's where I think I learned how to, be a person and how to listen to the world.
I love that. Lake docks are also my favorite place at camp, especially around dusk or just after dusk if you have a little lantern with you.
For sure.
You could like turn it off and like have the moon come out and adjust to the sounds, but you still have it just in case.
I remember one time there was one game that was set in this village overrun by these magical plagues, and the way to cure it was the plant of summer was growing too virulently, and it was growing over itself and growing over itself. And someone had to go and find the spirit of the forest and plant the seed of winter where summer was growing, so that summer could finally die and the tree of winter could grow. And then someone had to get married over the plant by the forest spirit. And the whole night there was speakers set up on the dock echoing this this beautiful atonal flute music and like distant storms kind of echoing across the lake. And because of, I said it's a basin, so it reverberates. So the sound reverberated everywhere you went. There was this sort of endless rhythm. And we finally, and we finally get to where the god of the forest is, who's this figure in this giant deer head with these huge antlers, and the antlers hanging strips of paper. And the deer god, gives them the seed of winter, and they plant the seed. And just as the two people are getting married, it starts to rain. As the seed is lowered into the ground and the marriage ceremony begins, it starts to rain, and the distant rain of the speakers gets drowned out by the real rain. And then it comes crashing down very perfectly. And that's what it's like to play games when the land knows how to play.
Wow. I love including the land in games, and now I will always include the land in games.
Yeah, I grew up learning. It's different with tabletop, but definitely if I do still LARP, which it's been a hot second, but when I play a game with the land, you want to invite the land. You want to say thank you to the land for playing with us. That's important.
What are some ways that you say thank you? What little rituals you have to say thank you?
You say it. You leave little offerings. You listen. Listening is one of the greatest gifts you can give anyone, including the land. You watch it. You notice what used to be there, learning about the history of the land, learning about who properly actually stewards it is a way of giving a gift to the land. And following its wishes and following kind of the rhythms it gives you is how you say thanks to it.
Love that. Yeah. I the first time I went to a queer witch camp,
for sure.
I lost my piece of red carnelian that I brought that I really loved. It had this great stripe running through it. And I decided that was just an offering to the land. In addition to the other intentional offerings that I left, that was my unintentional offering.
Absolutely, yeah.
That's cool. I love that you brought that up. That's really lovely.
Yeah, for sure.
Is there anything else you want to share about Sleepaway or how you sort of got into or learned about tabletop role-playing game design?
I played my first tabletop game like in 2015, which means I started playing about 5 or 6 years after I had started, playing games. I finally learned how to play tabletop games, and it was Monster Hearts. And I played Monster Hearts, and then I played Dungeons and Dragons Fourth Edition. And then it was like at that point I was already, just so desynchronized from what everyone else was doing. But Sleepaway was my first. It was my first Kickstarter. It was my first time doing a Kickstarter. It's I wouldn't be here without its success. And it's a very special, wonderful game. Even if horror is not your cup of tea, which it's not for many people, I think it also does a very good job with gender in a way that's very special.
Mhm.
It has what do you call? It takes on an approach to gender that actually went viral on TikTok for a bit there 6 or so months ago, because people really got into the list of gender options, which is that when you make a character, it asks you to describe your gender, and none of the gender words have anything to do with how we frame a gender. It's all like, are you, describe your gender, um, you know, uh, health goth, eagle, none of your business, overwhelming, vacant. It's a gender that's disconnected from our models of gender, and people like that a lot, and I'm really proud of that in that game as well.
Like today's gender is lion emoji and a Pikachu.
Yeah, it's very it's focused on uh gender is about an association with yourself. Gender is a matrix by which you can understand your world and the symbols that you associate with your world. And sometimes those genders are the arbitrary categorizations that society presents to us, and sometimes uh, it's useful to look at them through other lenses. And my favorite bit always with Sleepaway is how much cis people like that presentation of gender. Um, it's interesting to see cis people who are like, oh, my gender is boring, and then you're like, okay, but pick a gender though, and then they're looking at the list and they're like, oh, my gender is a lighthouse over the sea, and it's like, now, was your gender so boring? Was it really, or did you just grow up being told your gender is boring?
I'm just grinning over here.
Mhm.
I remember those sort of listicle things. Can you tell us about your experience with queer disability?
So I have been queer for a while, and I've been disabled for a while, and I've been aware of both of those for less than I've been either. I've been aware I've been queer for a while, but um, I think, we talked a bit about queer disability before. I think queerness and disability go hand in hand much more than people realize it does. I think that when you talk about you know queerness in games, you also want to talk about disability in games. Uh, I think that the way in which we frame disability is secretly often very unproductive.
Mm.
I hope that uh, a changing world means that we're going to see some dramatically different perspectives on disability, but uh, it's one of those things that's all around us, and also very hard for people to talk about.
Mhm.
And so I try to, there's a lot of work, just as much as there was work done in Wanderhome to make it feel accessible for queerness. There's also a lot of work done to make sure it felt accessible for folks with mobility aids or fatigue, or what have you. There's kind of, a lot of different levels on that front.
Hmm. Yeah. I This is not related to your content, but I know there's been a um, combat wheelchair that's come out that everyone's been very
Yeah.
excited about for the last year or so.
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's neat.
yeah.
Um, I think it's awfully neat. Uh, I think Dungeons and Dragons, I think Dungeons and Dragons is still kind of on a philosophical level, very built on an anti sort of on a abled centric mindset. But I
Yeah.
love kind of disabled folks taking it and making their own. It's still not, D&D is not for me, but I really admire when folks kind of go in there and are like, hey, I will make this my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
I will kind of build my own structure in there.
Yeah. I stopped playing and streaming D&D last December because of how bad they are at racism.
Yeah, for sure. That's and the thing about, racism and disability is that when you see something that's bad at handling disability, oftentimes very bad at handling racism.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out those things, and also queerness, all those things tend to go hand in hand.
Well, and I love how with Wanderhome, you're like, okay, all the player characters are animals.
Mm-hmm.
Like that sort of removes any of the, at least to my assessment, and maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong, but to my assessment, that removes a lot or all of the racism concerns.
I think that it's impossible when you're dealing with white folks, and like certainly even with myself, I worked with consultants for this reason, but like certainly like I think that racism as a social structure is one that can like I think that making your characters animals isn't necessarily enough to actually undermine structurally kind of the force that is racism in kind of the internalized racism that folks bring to, well, especially white people bring to the table. But I do think like part of the impulse for animal folk and treating animal folk in a way that's not kind of Zootopia, right? Because the idea of playing animals can be very regressive when you use animals, when you try to use animals to talk about racism, like when Zootopia tries to talk about racism, it immediately kind of stumbles and falls on its face because it turns race into a question of how do we accept these biological differences, and that's not what race is. Race is a question of power. And Wanderhome, I hope puts it in such a way where where it is where sort of tackling I hope that it kind of brings it into a space that is kind of easier to pin down. Like I like to think of the advantage of animal folk. It's not so much that you can eradicate these social dynamics because they come from the people at the table, but I hope that by making folks animals, it can almost like put it down on the table in a way without putting it down on the table, right? Like you're not being like, before we play, we must discuss societal trauma, which is a pretty awful way to, frame stuff. But, like just because it puts people, in a spot where they're, like someone says that to me, I don't want to discuss it. But making them animals, I hope, and kind of taking the approach Wanderhome does, I hope gives you the space to now analyze it. And Allenbach, as you say, with biological determinism, yeah, that's what I mean when I say that animal folk are not their bodies are not free of political connotations, both kind of on the Redwall level, which yes, it's specious, it's also racist. Like those rats are representatives of non-white cultures. You read the Redwall books as an adult, and it's not fun. You will really feel the fact that Brian Jacques is a fundamentalist Christian. It really comes through in a couple of those books. That's why I get a little prickly when people are like, "Oh, Wanderhome is the Redwall game," and I'm like, "No, I don't want to be the Brian Jacques game. That dude was pretty awful." But I think I take little bits and pieces without being bound to Brian Jacques' worldview that biological determinism is the metric by which you can determine human worth, and that you can determine some lives are worth more than others based on their inbuilt capacity to cause harm to others.
Yeah, I appreciate the distinction you bring. Well, anything else on the topic of queer disability and race and racism in tabletop games before we move on to small press publishing?
Small press publishing. Let's go on right ahead.
Okay. So
Also, I'm holding my laptop like this because sitting up got to be too much, but I
I
hope it kind of
really
gives me a
appreciate the self-care you're doing right now.
yeah, hell
Yeah.
yeah.
I have 4 questions left.
Sounds good.
Okay, cool. So for those looking into getting into small press publishing, how did you get started and what do you wish you'd known from the beginning?
So I got started because when I did Sleepaway, I realized I needed a separate spot to put the money. I couldn't just keep it all in my personal banking account. And so I made a DBA and then it kind of all went from there. Things I wish I knew from the start. Just first off, make a business structure far sooner than you think you have to. If you don't have a name, maybe don't bother, but like it won't hurt to nail down something, you know? Like it won't hurt to have a little something of a structure. Um
Like an LLC or something
yeah, an
sort of thing?
LLC or even a DBA is good based you know, it depends on what your local laws are and how expensive various things are for you. But have a little structure. It will make your life a lot easier in the future than if you try to operate it all on a personal level. I think also having a friend is good. Doing it alone is really soul sucking. And I couldn't have done any of this without my business partner. So that's the thing I kind of wish I'd known from the beginning is have a friend involved.
Yeah. Honestly, a big part of my um, ability to continue as a Twitch streamer
For sure, for sure.
um, is my friend Mirami, who's modding the chat right now.
Mm-hmm.
Mirami like helps do all the bots and all the backend Discord things, and
Mm-hmm.
like we meet once a week and just talk about how the whole thing is going. And so I really feel like it's our channel, not just my channel,
Yeah,
because
for
we work
sure, for
together.
sure.
We work together on it. I'm just the
Mm-hmm.
quadruple Leo who like has a face.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh my goodness, of course. No offense, of course, you're a quadruple Leo. I fully that fits up. That fits together.
I love that. Yes, you getting random
Mhm.
Twitter DMs from me with like, "Hey, I just had top surgery. You're cool. Do you want to talk sometime?"
You sent that pretty quickly after you got top surgery.
It's
Also, you
true.
reached out to me,
It's true. I
which
think
was
I
like,
was. I think I was courageous because I was still
mhm.
on the pain meds, and I was like,
Yes, for
"Nothing
sure. That
matters. It's fine."
that's when it's easiest to reach out for sure, for sure.
Well, and you were so kind and like open back. That was the best
Yeah.
part. It's like you weren't like, "Oh," you're just like, "Oh yeah,
Yeah.
totally." It was like we were already friends. The way you
Yeah,
responded,
absolutely.
it was
I,
so
I try for
nice.
that. I try for that.
You
Yeah.
succeed at that, Jay. It's so cool. I love it so
Thank you.
much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the one of the special things that's been happening on the channel the last month and probably for a couple more
Mm-hmm.
streams is Mirror Me has been producing and playing the video games, and I've just been like
Mm-hmm.
in Discord talking or only in the Twitch chat sort of typing
Oh, wonderful.
while I
Yeah.
recover. And so people who,
Mm-hmm.
for the last 15 months have no idea who Mirror Me is have been getting to know Mirror Me a
Mm-hmm.
little bit, and that's been fun.
That rules. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That really rules.
Yeah, totally.
Mm-hmm.
I love having a friend. That's really great advice that I completely agree
Mm-hmm.
with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, like the thing is, like having a friend is the sort of thing where it's like, will that cover you for like will you encounter issues as a small business owner? Yes. Will having a friend make them solvable issues? Also, yes.
Yeah, totally. Well, and someone who's been invested enough to like have the whole context, have all the information, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
not just like hi person, like hi therapist or hi person who doesn't know the details, like let me spend an hour catching up on all this and then
Yeah,
we can
yeah,
talk about
absolutely.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
it's very cool stuff. Well, Jay, can you share a moment of gender euphoria?
Here's an interesting one that I think is probably not what most people think of when they think about gender euphoria. Pretty recently, I was driving back in my car from something or another, and I think it was like a failed Tinder date or something. And I was thinking about how people perceive me. And I think for a long time, I had struggled a lot with kind of attractiveness because I think attractiveness is oftentimes, attractiveness is kind of the loaded gun in queer spaces, right? Is that it's the thing everyone wants, and it's the thing everyone is really scared they don't have, and are really scared to kind of see, but are kind of desperate for. And a lot of the way in which queerness is discussed is through the model of attractiveness. And I've always hated that. It's part of what it kept me in the closet for a bit longer than I wanted it to. It's also, I think, kind of shaped my life experiences. It's led me to do a lot of stupid things in the name of attractiveness. And I realized that I was getting older. And I'm not that old. I'm still very young comparatively. But I realized I was getting older. And I think critically, I realized what growing older would mean, what the passage of time refers to when it talks about, like, when you conceptualize getting older, and a wave of incredible relief washed over me to realize that I would get to have so much time being someone who is I get to have so much time being old, and how it means that, in a sense, it's so much time to be me, and also it is so much time away from attractiveness. It's so much time where that is not the framework. And I realized, I was like, oh, that's what I'm looking forward to. And it was kind of this moment of euphoria that comes through realizing, like, oh, like, I could spend my entire life mad at myself that I don't have as great tits as I did when I was 15 years old. Or I can be happy to be kind of, to when I think about how do I want people to see me when they look at me, what are the other things I care about? Because it's not actually, do they want to, do they think I'm attractive? That's not what it's ever been about. It's, do they respect me? Do they find me interesting? Do they find me engaging? Do they find me, like, do they think that I know what I'm talking about? Do they find me intimidating? Maybe, do they, like, what is it that I actually want? And what I realized is that it has very little to do with attractiveness, and that I am very close to being where I want to be.
Yeah. I love that. It reminds me of when we were talking about how you're kind of Baba Yaga in the woods.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
I'm the ant.
yeah, Baba Yaga gives no fucks about attractiveness. I saved
Yeah,
that F-bomb
exactly.
for right there.
That was the one F-bomb. We can't use it.
I love that. All right. Well, the question on everyone's mind is, what's next? You've already made at least 2 cool games, and you're making something else. Like you said, to you, Wanderhome sort of, that was back in December, and now you're on to your next thing. Now it's
Yeah.
October of the next year.
Mm-hmm.
What are you allowed to tell us?
So, first off, we have a Kickstarter coming in a week. A week. Okay. It's a smaller Kickstarter. I'm doing it with my friend who I mentioned earlier, Jamila Najati. It's for Our Haunt, which is a found family game about ghosts. It's also B.O.B. It's very sweet. It's very wonderful. It has art by the incomparable Habil Furhouse. It is very delightful. I will send you the link real quick so that you can drop it in chat. I know, a week, Logan. I feel the same way. I didn't realize that until just now. I guess I have to tweet about it. More. I've tweeted about it.
Is that why you were like, please interview me sooner than later?
Yes, partially. Because I know that I am also
Gonna
because
get
I get
busy.
very. I did get busy, and I also get busy in ways I can't predict. So if I do an interview, I like to do it now as opposed to in a month from now, when I will forget that we agreed to do an interview at all. Additionally, in March of 2022, we are doing Yuzeba's Bed and Breakfast, which is the thing that I have been involved in. It's a project that I've been working on with a team, and we've been working on it since October 2019. So This thing has been a long time coming. It is a very beautiful, wonderful game about a found family of magical, beautiful beings living at a bed and breakfast run by a heartless witch. It is nothing like you've ever seen before. I can tell you a few things. The Ashcan is out now, and I'll also send you the link to the Ashcan, which is the PDF document that people can check out now. And I will share you the link real quick. Here you go. Here it is. And that is
This art
I
is
know
amazing.
the art is so delightful. The art is by Esther Santiago, who's the concept artist for the game. And don't worry, Logan. Yazeba, Yaziba, Yazaba are all valid pronunciations. As long as you get the Z and then the B, you're good. Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast. There are a few things you can see in that ashcan that kind of let you in on some of my favorite bits. It uses pre-made characters and short episodic storytelling in order to start. You wanted a game you can play in 2 hours. Here's a game you can learn the rules to and play and feel satisfied with in less than 2 hours.
I love
It's
that.
a very quick, delightful game that has the ability to it takes an hour to play, and then the decisions you make will impact the game for the rest for forever. So it shapes itself with everyone who plays it. And it's a very special, wonderful game. And I am so excited for Yazeba's Bed and Breakfast. It's the thing. Again, we've all been working on it for 2 years now. And I am so hyped for folks to get their hands on it. So that's the big thing to keep an eye out. March 2022, Yuseba's Bed and Breakfast.
Wonderful. Oh, this is so fun.
Mm-hmm.
I just love this creature eating cake with
I
their
know that's Hey
face.
Kid. That's Hey Kid. They are the demon. They are a demon that was left on the front door as a baby, and have grown up at the bed and breakfast. And they are a rambunctious little demon child who, among other things, steals cake.
That's so wonderful. I love it so much.
Mm-hmm.
So if we want to get like updates on all this stuff, we should go to your website. We should follow you on Itch. We should follow you on Kickstarter. Follow your
me on
Twitter.
Twitter. Follow my Twitter. Follow my Twitter. Follow me on follow me on Twitter. Go to our website and subscribe to our mailing list is always a good bet. Subscribe to our Patreon. We have a Patreon Discord where we do playtests and we do kind of day by day exciting stuff. Share first looks. Share exclusive games that have not come out anywhere else. There's a few games that are on our Patreon that have not come out anywhere else, including among them a queer Norse tactical grid-based combat game. Oh no, that one made it into the world. Never mind. But there's also a Dark Academia game. There is a game about 5 teenagers fighting the endless wolves. There is all sorts of weird games, from the tiny and unplayable to the sprawling and impossible. We try and do a lot of different stuff at Possible Games. You can check it all out on our Patreon, on our website, on our Itch.io page, on our Twitter. And yeah, thank you.
I love that so much. Okay. The last sort of biography question I have is, what would you like to make sure folks know about your perspective on gender and non-binary / trans issues?
What a question. What a quick, Oh, and by the way, what would you like carved into your tombstone kind of question? What do I want? What do I want on there? Oh Lord.
That's how I like to close things out.
Yeah, just drop it on me quick. No easy one. This is hard. I want I don't know what I want people to know about me. I guess what I want everyone else to know is that gender and games have a lot in common. They are both systems. And the thing that is true of all games and also true of all gender is that the moment you think you've figured out the limits to it, there is always someone who's going to come along and do things in a way you won't expect and surprise you. And you can't settle down and get comfortable with how you think things should be done, because there will always be someone who does things differently than you. And the great beauty of it all is not to reject that, but not to enforce orthodoxy, but instead to embrace the limitless capacity of the human mind to experience things differently than you could thought possible. That's my feeling on it.
I love that. That's so wonderful. Well, are there any other resources you want to make sure we get listed on our show notes or spoken out loud for folks to know about? Is there any other cool tabletop stuff that's going on that...
There probably is. I've also been on the call for almost 3 hours, or almost 2 hours. So if there are, I don't remember them anymore.
That's fair. And if you think of them later, you can send them to me and I'll add them to the show notes.
For sure. As always, I think I do my best to retweet stuff as much as I can of cool stuff going on in the scene. But I mean, Logan's game is really gosh darn. I can say thank the Lord's name in vain. Logan's game is really goddamn exciting.
I think
what
so
else
too.
is really exciting? There's a lot of great stuff.
And Logan's game is really trans. Also.
Oh yeah. I mean,
because it's an autobiography of a trans man. Like, let's go.
Let's go. Almost caught me slipping. But yeah, keep an eye out for all the cool stuff in the world. There is so much out there that is exciting and thrilling. And every single day I think I know all the cool stuff, and it turns out there's more cool stuff that I wasn't prepared for. So yeah.
All right. Well, this has been a total delight.
Thank you all so much for having me.
100%. And everyone, Jay is very nice, and you should totally support Jay and Possum Creek Games in all of the endeavors that those entities do.
See what I mean? No pronouns. Put a little respect on the name. That's what I'm talking about. Put a little stumble in your step. Keep you off your toes. Put a little exactly. That's how I like to see my pronouns used.
I love it so much.